this is Linda, and I know some of you may be familiar with me because I have a podcast for nonprofits called Learn with Linda. But this is my very first podcast in a new channel I'm opening up called Spiritual Wisdom because I've written a number of spiritual books myself, and I'm familiar with a number of various different spirituality methods and religions and things like that. And I thought right away when I wanted to start this podcast, I thought the first person I want to invite on is my good friend Jill. And Jill has been, we've known each other, I'm not sure how many years. We probably don't even want to talk about that. But I've attended many of her shamanic workshops. And the main focus of this topic is her new book called Turning Screams to Music. And Jill is going to be holding that book up and showing you that, and we'll be giving you a link to buy the book and if you're interested. But I want to start by asking you, Jill, where did you get that title, Turning Screams to Music?
Well, it's very provocative, and people have asked me that question right out of the gate. So many years ago, I was living in New York City. I had a practice with a lot of adult survivors of abuse, and I was getting ready to write my first book. And I was stuck. I was getting depressed. I was having dreams about abuse. And I went to bed one night and I said, help. I just said, I need help. And in my dream, I saw a number of people on a grassy knoll moving away, and there was a tornado, a scream coming for me. And I could hear the scream in my dream, and it settled over me and it turned to music. And I went, wow, wow. But the astonishing thing, even more astonishing, was I woke up and I was calm. I wasn't depressed. I was focused. I went to my computer and started writing my first book proposal. So that was my first shamanic dream, in that it helped me heal. It was a healing dream. And a colleague of mine who was helping me and craft my ideas for my book said, Jilly, that's what you do. You help people turn your screams to music. And so that became the title of the book and a metaphor throughout. Because as a country and as a world, we need to help each other turn our screams to music.
Absolutely. That's an amazing story. I was saying wow to myself just as you said wow. But I know you've written several other books before this one, but what made you decide to write a book after all those years of thinking about the vivid dream that you had? What made you decide to write this book?
Well, actually, the title came much later. I had another title, and people encouraged me to put this title on it. I wanted to write a book about my spiritual experiences because my spiritual team has been tapping me on the shoulders for many, many years, including that dream. And I cataloged several of those experiences. And I wanted to do it in such a way that it was a teaching tool for people like you, like me, who are having spiritual experiences, but they have nobody to talk to, and they have no understanding of what might be happening to them. I now know that my spiritual team was tapping me on the shoulder to activate my inner shaman to become the shamanic practitioner that I've been for the last 25 years, 24 years.
Wow, that's amazing. And we've mentioned the word shamanism, and I know you'll tell us a little bit more about that, but when and how did you get into shamanism?
Well, it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't on my bucket list. For me, a shaman was somebody who lived in National Geographic in a land far, far away. I'm a little white girl from Claremont, Southern California, but I had a car accident. I lost the use of my arms and hands. I was very depressed. And then my mom died and my dad died within a year. And someone I respect said, Jelly, you've had a soul loss. And I went, I don't know what that is, but yeah, probably. And so I went with them to Hank Wesselman, Dr. Munn's workshop in Big Sur at Esalen Institute. And I really went to get well. I just said, there must be something else I'm doing because nothing else is working. And I had a very lovely, profound experience, but I didn't really think too much had happened. But my depression lifted and I started getting well and I started singing in the shower and I started wanting to work again. And I was like, maybe it's that thing I did. And I went and took another training from Dr. Wesselman, Dr. Hank Wesselman. And he said, you know, Julie, you're really good at this. And I said, don't you think I ought to practice for a year? And he said, no, 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 you've been a therapist, you've been a healer. And then I began to uh, work with people because shamanism is very fast. We can get an hour, in an hour or two, a session or two, we can get maybe 6 months worth of work done because we're moving energy. The difference really between shamanism and a Reiki session or other kind of healing is that our spiritual team really does the work. Why it works, we don't know, but it does. And I've done several thousand sessions, and it's really been my honor to serve people.
Well, you've certainly talked about an amazing story with yourself personally, and I've experienced some of your shamanistic sessions, and I know it's helped me a great deal. But what do you think is possible in shamanism that really isn't possible in other treatment modalities?
Good question. I think for me, shamanism does supply something that other modalities doesn't. For one thing, when someone's had a trauma or shock or a loss, we would say someone dissociates or they go into shock. But we really don't have in the West any good ways of getting those parts of ourselves back. In shamanism, um, spirit would say those are soul losses. And so soul retrieval is a way of getting those parts of us back. So that's one thing that shamanism provides that I haven't seen in other work. The other thing is it gets at things that we don't know, we don't know. Because we're looking with our inner eyes, with our spiritual eyes, we can sometimes see things that, the client or I didn't even talk about. And yet that's the source of their trouble. So I now have several doctors, therapists, chiropractors who send me their stuck patients. I'm the specialist, I'm the stuck buster.
Wow.
Because sometimes, again, we can get at things that normally in therapy or in chiropractic or whatever should be working. But once that energy block is removed or the soul parts come back, the person can flourish. And that's what happened to me. I was supposed to have permanent loss, use of my arms and hands, and no more.
That's amazing. It just, I think people probably might find that incredulous to even think of something like that, that it
Exactly.
would do that kind of work for you. But you've been in this field for a long time. I think you said 24 years. But what have you seen in those 24 years that's
Oh
also
my, oh my, oh
holds
my.
for you? I,
Well,
I know
actually,
24 years is a lot to sum up in a few minutes, but
well, some of them have been quite miraculous, and it isn't always that way. But in this book, I have a chapter where I really talk about the many, many different ways shamanism can work for depression, for trauma, for pain, for anxiety, for a whole variety of things. I've seen actually very early in my practice, Hank and his wife's name is also Jill, sent me a woman. And she called me and she said, and she gave me permission to talk about this story. It's in my book. She said, have you ever worked with children? And I said, no, but I'm willing. What happened? She said, my son is 4 and he's never spoken. I said, really? No, he's not on the spectrum. They've had him tested. He's very animated. He's very affectionate. No words. I said, has he ever been dropped? And she said, yeah, he fell out of his car seat in the kitchen. We rushed him to the hospital. No sign of any injury. In my mind, I'm like, maybe he's knocked out of his body. So we made an appointment and I did the process. And I said, by the way, if he talks, would you call me? Because that's kind of huge. So she called about a week later and she said, he slept for a couple days, which is healing. And the next day he woke up and said to his sister, that's my seat. And I'm like, ah, it scared me. It was so astonishing. It's like that. So in those days, I had Hank's home phone number and I called him, blah, 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 you'll never guess what happened. Oh my God. And he said, that's right. You're a soul catcher. You're a soul retrieval practitioner. And so that got my attention. So I had the privilege for 7 years of working at Cohut Psychiatric. And I told Dr. Cohut, who hired me, the psychiatrist, this is what I do. I'm not going to hide it. And he said, oh, we don't have one of those. So I saw some very, very astonishing things. with some people who are mentally ill. And it doesn't always happen that way. There's not guarantees. But I certainly have seen people recover from trauma, accidents, abuse. The conversation in my profession as a therapist is, once you've been abused or raped or whatever, that's kind of it on you. You're broken. But maybe not. Maybe in this paradigm, we can get those parts of you back. We can remove that negativity, and people can experience their wholeness, their divinity, their creativity, their immortality.
Yeah. You've talked about soul loss and soul retrieval, and I'm sure that's a totally foreign concept to many people, and it
Sure.
was to me. But can you explain more about soul loss and soul retrieval?
Well, another way of saying it might be self-loss. That like when I had my accident, or somebody has a horseback riding accident, or they're at the dentist, or they've had some kind of procedure, some of them steps aside, and those are things that we do automatically to protect ourselves. And when we come back from anesthesia or come back from the accident, we may heal from our physical injuries, but there still may be something that's off. I'm a breast cancer survivor of almost 10 years, by the way.
Hmm.
So, yay. But after my various procedures, I had another practitioner who got me back. I came back and I felt fuzzy. I felt out of focus. I felt not all here. And the minute she did that, it was like, shoom, I could feel myself focus. So when I talk to people, I'm listening for those traumas. Somebody says something like, I've never been the same since he died, or something feels missing, or my heart feels empty. Those are all, in my mind, ways of describing what we would call a soul loss or a self loss. Once I explain it to people, they get it.
Hmm. And how do you go about doing the soul retrieval process?
So the way I work, and I explain to people when they call me what a session looks like. So first of all, I say a prayer for someone's highest good and greatest service. I connect with them. I connect them with their spiritual team, which increases their power, their wattage. We remove any energetic blocks, and then we bring those self parts back, those soul parts that need to come back. That's the protocol. My sessions usually take an hour and a quarter, and it can be life-changing. Sometimes somebody comes to me and they've done 9 or 10 other things, and there's still something that's stuck. There's still something that's missing. And many times my shamanic helpers can uh, get them unstuck.
You've mentioned the spiritual team, and I understand this because I've worked with Jill and I have my own spiritual team.
Yes.
I know that everyone's spiritual team is unique, but can you explain how you even go about figuring out who your spiritual team is?
Well, I see a lot of people who are in touch with angels, or they know their animal totem, or they are really connected with their grandmother who was a curandera or a spiritual healer in another tradition. That's the beginning of a spiritual team. In shamanism, everything that's alive has a spiritual aspect. So that's the first piece, is to augment that team. So the angels are still there, the grandmother's still there, your dog that you were fond of is still working with you on the spiritual team. And we flush that out. And if people do workshops with me, as you have, you get to be in more conscious collaboration with them. They were working with me way back in New York 40 years ago, but I didn't know how to dial them up at will. Now I've got an 800 number, if you will.
There you go, a direct line, huh?
That's right.
That's what you need.
In traditional societies, there was one shaman, there was one apprentice, and they had the secrets. Now we're living in a time where the shamanic skills are available to everyone. So if you're interested, you can find a practitioner to work with, or a good class. Find somebody who's ethical, who can get the job done.
Um, I know that the shamanic tradition comes mainly from the indigenous people, from Native Americans, but
Yes.
could anybody learn how to be a shaman?
Yes. Everyone has, and Hank Wesselman would say, it's in our DNA, the ability to vision. And some of us have an aptitude for it, as I do. So, but everyone has an opportunity to go in and visualize and find your calm place, find your spiritual team. And there are people who may feel called to develop themselves and get more training.
And how does somebody go about finding help if they want shamanic help? How would they go about getting help?
Well, they can email me at shamanichealingtherapy.com, or they can also go to the Society for Shamanic Practice, which has a list of shamanic practitioners by state all over the country. So if you're in another state and you want to work with someone more locally, you can find somebody who's been well trained.
And I know you've talked about different issues that you've helped people with. Is there anything else that you can think of, anything that would motivate someone to say, I think I'm going to try this?
Well, I just think if it calls to you, if it feels right to you, I don't enroll or push anybody into this. If somebody calls me and I'm not sure if I'm the right person, I do what's called a diagnostic journey, which means I talk to my spiritual team and we have a chat. And I
Hmm.
say, this and this and this is going on with Susie Q or Henry. And am I the right person? What do you recommend? And if I'm not, who can I recommend? What is the next step for them? And I don't charge for that.
Wow, that's amazing. Why do you think shamanism works when so many other techniques are failing to? I mean, I think there's so many issues in this world, physical, mental, psychological, whatever. But why do you think shamanism works so well?
Um, the truth is, I don't know the answer, but I can kind of talk around it and say, I think that it is the power of working with spirit, working with our spiritual team, because they really do the work. I am just a witness. I'm a good clairvoyant. I'm a good clairaudient. I report back to my client what it is that my spiritual team has done or undone. Um, and it gets at something that I think other modalities don't.
And I think from my personal experience, I know sometimes I've talked to Jill and told her about an issue I'm dealing with, and she'll call me the next day or maybe even sometimes the same day and say, "Oh, I was thinking about you, and this is the experience that I had." And I'm like really just blown away that it works long distance, which I think is
Right.
that you don't have to be face to face. In fact, I went to one session in Jill's home where she had a group of, I think maybe there were about 8 people there, and we all worked together. But most of the sessions I've had with you, Jill, have been long distance, and
Yes.
I just find that fascinating. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, particularly since the pandemic, all the work I've done has been online or on the phone, and with the internet, it gives us access really to the world. People can go online to my website or other people's website, get a sense of them. I had one lady who found me online and scrolled through a number of practitioners and looked at my picture and she said, "You're the one." So I trust that. I trust that the right people will find me. That's what I say to Spirit. Send me the people I am to serve. Send me the people I am to teach. And I now have a network of other practitioners who have various specialties. And sometimes I refer to them because that's the person who can best serve the person. So I really want to represent the work so that hopefully in the next 5 or 10 years in my lifetime, shamanism will be like chiropractic or acupuncture or massage. It will be more mainstream and a choice and available.
You mentioned specialties. I find that kind of intriguing because I guess that's something I had not thought about, that shamans are very much like doctors and they have
Exactly.
specialties. So
Exactly.
what would be
I
some
did.
specialties?
Well, I have a specialty. It wasn't something that I asked for. It's just what Spirit has given me is I'm a soul retrieval practitioner. That's not true of all other shamans. I know Hank Wesselman was a good extractor. He was great at removing those inner blocks, those things that are stuck in our bodies or in our energy field, our aura. So that's what I mean by specialties.
Hmm. That's really, really interesting. And I'm hoping that our listeners, if you are totally unaware of shamanism or maybe even a little scared of the thought, that you'll think differently because I know for me personally, it's been extremely rewarding. And um, I happen to be a Christian Roman Catholic, but I don't see shamanistic in any way conflicting with my religious values. I think it's opened me up to be more spiritual in my own religious practice. So I think that's an important thing. Sometimes people think, oh, well, they sound like a bunch of quacks or, little weirdos or something like that.
Well, and that's why I really want to represent the work as credible and take the woo-woo out of it. I agree with everything you said. I'm a very spiritual person, was before shamanism, but it actually has deepened my spirituality because many of the religious figures that I have prayed to are on my spiritual team. So I have a much more intimate and lively relationship with Jesus, with Archangel Michael, with the other archetypes.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And sometimes your spiritual team, I know for me personally, I found somebody totally unexpected on my spiritual team, and you just mentioned his name, Michael the Archangel, and I
Really?
never thought of relationship that would involve Saint Michael because I, in fact, the first time I saw him, I said, "What are you doing here? I'm a lover, not a fighter." And I always thought
He's
of him as
also
a
a healer. He's a warrior,
warrior.
but he's also a healer. And
Yes.
that aspect has been very rich and very empowering in these last few years.
Right. I think, sometimes we make judgments without realizing if we open ourselves up to these things, sometimes they can be very, very powerful.
Shamanism is a wide range of cultures. I work with a woman from India, and I saw a goddess, and she had coal eyes and alabaster skin, and I described her costume. I didn't know who she was, and she said, "Oh my goodness, that's good. That's Lakshmi." And I went, "Wow, okay, cool." She knew who it was, and it was a part of her culture. I work with a Mormon a person, and guess who comes in is the angel Moroni. So
Oh,
uh, shamanism is not any particular religion or tradition.
I think that's important for people to know because they might think, oh, this is against my religion or something, but you've obviously dealt with a wide variety of people from different
I
faith
have.
systems.
And I have also worked with people who are non-believers. So I don't know if I believe this. And I said, well, can you be open? I've had people who, my wife said I need to come see you here. I said, can you be open? And this particular person said yes. I said, that's all I need. And
Wow,
he wound up having a great result. He said, I
good.
still think you're a lady with a rich fantasy life. I said, I probably am. But he was up out of bed and playing tennis again.
I've been told that too, that I think you have a very vivid imagination. I said I
Exactly.
do, but sometimes the imagination reveals things that are real and true, and it's not all in your head either.
Exactly. Exactly.
But now the big question is, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, what if I went to a shaman, what would happen? So can you tell us what a shamanic session looks like?
Okay, so I did a little bit earlier. So first of all, when someone calls me or they email me, we spend about 15, 20 minutes on the phone talking. I want them to understand what shamanism is, what it isn't. I want to hear what's going on and see if I have the skill set to help them. If they make an appointment, I send them a client information sheet. It gives me a little background. And then we make a time on the phone, usually since the pandemic. And I talk some more. Then I go into meditation, we would say into a slightly altered state, and ask for the person's highest good and greatest service. My spiritual team connects them to their spiritual team. We do whatever extractions or things that need to be removed, and we bring those self parts or soul parts back. And then sometimes they're messages, not always, but I take notes. So then I call the person back and I debrief them essentially. And that whole thing takes maybe an hour and a quarter. That's me. Now, other shamanic people work differently. And I would suggest that people, if they're intrigued, if it calls to them, that they find somebody that they resonate with, that feels right to them, and ask them their background, their training, and what kind of results they have produced.
Mm. I, I think this is such a fascinating thing that I really think that people should try this, especially if they do have, I've talked to Jill when I've had physical pain. I've talked to her about, just issues that I've been struggling with, and it's always helped me tremendously. I know that some of your sessions, you also do some online sessions with groups of people. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, I'm not doing online anymore. Since the
Um,
pandemic, I got a little overdosed on Zoom. So I do sessions on freeconferencecall.com. I have workshops. They're small now, maybe for 6, 8 people.
mm,
People can go to my website, Shamanic Healing Therapy, and see the workshops. I usually have one on a Saturday, 9 to 3 Pacific Standard Time, Pacific Daylight Time right now, on a variety of topics. So if people are interested, they can go to my website, and I'd love to hear from people.
and do you still do groups in your home? I know I went to one group session that
I
was.
haven't in a long time. And here's why. Because of the internet, people come to me from Mexico. I've had somebody from England. I've had somebody from the East Coast, from Florida, from Denver, from Chicago. So it enables people from all over to have access to good training without having to get on a plane, without having to pay for a hotel. And it is lovely to be in Sacred Circle in the same place, but it limits people.
That's very true. I was just talking to someone in the nonprofit world that is strictly doing online training now, but for the same
Right.
reason, people don't want to spend that kind of money to travel to go to
It
conferences.
it makes it so accessible. And that's one of the wonderful things where technology meets spirituality or, any kind of training.
Mhm. You mentioned that there is a society, and I'm assuming that with that shamanic society, that people could find someone if they wanted someone right in their
Yes.
neighborhood.
So the Society for Shamanic Practice is the national organization, or actually international organization that I belong to. There are about 10,000 members,
Mhm.
uh, and some of us teach and post our workshops through that organization. People can go to that site and look for a practitioner in their area if they want to.
That would be really great. Why do you think shamanic practice works where other things fail?
I have no idea. Truth, people, one of the first questions people ask me is, how does it work? We actually don't know. But shamanism has been around for tens of thousands of years.
Oh,
And traditional peoples had a shamanic practitioner in their community, in their tribe, in their, city, wherever. I look forward to a day when it is as available as yoga. You
mhm.
know, 50 years ago, nobody knew about yoga. Now there's a yoga instructor and a yoga class in every city in the country.
Somebody was saying there's probably a yoga instructor on every corner.
Exactly. It's available and it's talked about, and it's something that is a part of people's lifestyle.
Do you incorporate yoga at all into your work or not?
Well, in my personal work, I have some breathing strategies. I have some stretchings I do, but not, I might suggest it to somebody as a client, but it's not something I do professionally.
Okay. Is there anything else that people should know that you would like people to know about either the book or about your work or about shamanism
Well,
in
the
general?
book is available on Amazon, Turning Screams to Music, and it's $15. You will learn a lot about me and my spiritual journey, which took a long time. Now people are coming to awakening spiritually much, much faster. The consciousness has gotten much higher, the vibration is much higher, and I didn't have any teachers or guides, but now there are people like me who are veterans who can help people along the way.
It's great. I really so much enjoyed our conversation. I mean, I always enjoy our conversations one on one, but now opening this up to the whole world, anybody that's interested, certainly feel free to get in touch with Jill, buy her book. I highly recommend it. I think it's just wonderful that people can be open to alternative forms of healing and growth. And I think it does both. I think not, maybe you don't need any particular healing, but just to grow spiritually, this is a great way to do it. Just getting in touch with my spiritual team meant a lot to me. It was really,
Thank you. Thank you
it
so
helped
much
me.
for having me.
Thank you. And as I said, buy the book, uh, contact Jill, contact the society if you feel that you want somebody that's right in your neighborhood, and do give this a try. I think you'll definitely, I've never heard of anybody being disappointed. I don't know if you have, Jill, but I haven't. So I want to thank Jill for her time, and look forward to talking to her again.
Thank you for having me.